Welcome back, everybody, to our early morning, well, not that early, but morning edition of Paranormal New Normal. I'm your host, as always, Jeremy, here trying to make the world seem a little more normal. Does it ever happen? No, it definitely it doesn't happen this early in the morning, so we're not going to expect that today. But I am here today, joined by a very special guest, a paranormal author and experiencer, Mr. Martin Tracey. How you doing today, sir?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks so much for having me, Jeremy. Looking forward to this and connecting with people on the other side of the Atlantic, so to speak, the other side of the pond, US people. So great. And worldwide, no doubt. But I know you've took the trouble to interview me with the time difference, early doors, your end. So thank you for that as well.
Uh, I've interviewed people from all over the world, so time differences are fun, but they're always manageable in some way or form.
Yeah, yeah.
It's Australians are the hard ones because they're like a 12-hour difference, like a 13, 14-hour difference, so it's a little bit harder on that one, but we make it work no matter what. If I want someone on my show, I'm gonna make sure I make the time to do it. So, but first question I ask everybody on this show is, what got you into the paranormal?
It's something that's always fascinated me since a really young age, the paranormal. I think it is because it is paranormal. I know that sounds really sort of not a great answer, but it is that thought of something else happening that we don't quite understand. And I think once you have the belief that something could be out there, and an open mind that things can happen that we don't understand, that can actually be quite fun and fascinating, because we all like to explore new things, and there's probably nothing can be more new to explore than the concept of something else happening in another world, a paranormal, ghosts, vampires, whatever it may be within that wide umbrella of paranormal. So it's just something that's always fascinated me. I mean, as a kid, I used to watch the Hammer House films, which are very kind of traditional sort of characters like your Draculas, your Frankensteins, your werewolves.
Classics, yeah, all the classic Hammer
But
films.
just them things really tapped into things, into my psyche, my brain. I just always wanted to know more about the paranormal. Then I ended up having an experience, but I'll go on to that later, which I never thought I would, And it's not a case of I'm a believer, therefore I've kind of made it up. I'll let people judge for themselves. I'm not there to convince anyone. I know the experience I had, and it's very real to me. And I never thought I'd go through my life ever having one, but I did, and that's that.
Well, I mean, yeah, the classic films like the Hammer films, or as we have on this side of the pond, the Universal monster films.
Yeah.
They kind of sparked everybody's interest into things that go bump in the night, and little did most of us know how real these things can be. I mean, you're not going to find Frankenstein's monster roaming around your front yard. I mean, hopefully, but but a lot of the other creatures in there. I mean, was an invisible man if not a ghost, kind of.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
vampires, that's a whole nother topic we can get into later, but I mean, that's a whole nother topic that might have some basis in reality. We don't really know. But
Mhm.
I mean, and there's animals that are similar anyway, so I mean, they got the idea from somewhere. But,
Mm.
so I mean, all these things, it's actually funny because we do movie brackets on this show as well as specials, and there is a
Mm.
there's a Hammer Films bracket made up. We haven't, I don't know when we'll get to it, but we'll get to it eventually. I think it's 2 or 3 parts. There's so many Hammer films, but yeah,
Mhm.
I'll be diving into those eventually. But so the second question I usually ask everybody in this show is, have you had any paranormal experiences? And I already know the answer, and I'm dying to hear what it is.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a place in England called the Peak District, and it's a beautiful place. It's called the Peak District literally because there's loads of peaks, hills, greenery, very mountainy area, beautiful, quaint chocolate box villages, etc., etc., etc. So I and it's not too. I live in Birmingham, and the Peak District is only about an hour hour and a half, 2 hours at the most to certain parts away from where I live. So as a holiday destination, it's perfect, and I just love the place. Anyway, so me and my wife, we rented out this holiday cottage, and it was a beautiful cottage, but it had a very long history. When we went into the cottage, we read the pack, and we understood that it had, in the past, going back literally centuries. I mean, it'd be renovated and brought up to a more modern day way of living within the cottage, but nevertheless, it had stood on that spot for centuries, and it was once used as a slaughterhouse. And there was also a well in the middle of the actual cottage, and it was behind a locked door. So you couldn't go into this locked door where the slaughterhouse was. And then that gets your mind thinking, okay, back in the centuries, okay, it's a slaughterhouse used for animals, etc., etc. But, you know, could it have been used for humans? Who knows? Back then, you know, if they'd have brought people in. But anyway, this door, as I said, was locked. We got up the next morning after our first night, and walking away from this locked door was sandy stroke muddy footprints. So this door's locked, but there's these footprints walking away from the door. So, how can that happen? You know, we cleaned them up, kind of looked at one another, didn't think too much of it. Next night, got up the next morning, same again. Them footprints were there, walking away from this locked door where the well was, where the slaughterhouse used to be, etc., etc., etc. So that was a bit scary. Then, what also then happened was, as we were there 4 or 5 nights, something like that, they had the very old latch doors, and these latches, they took a bit of effort to lift up and to pull open, but these latches used to just like literally pop up and the door would blow open. Now there's no wind, and as I says, it took a bit of effort to lift the latch. This happened quite a few times on the door, especially the one in our bedroom that led to the bathroom. And then I woke up literally to see a figure. I'd never told my wife this till we got home. And you're probably thinking, why didn't you just get out of there, Martin? But it's weird. When it happens to you, it is scary, but you just kind of deal with it, and you don't run like in the movies and just run away. You kind of contain it, and we still had a really good holiday. That's a bizarre thing, but apart from the spookies. But anyway, I woke up and there was this figure literally standing next to me at the bedside, and then just gradually disappeared from head to toe. So that was my experience of the paranormal, Jeremy.
So yeah. I mean, it sounds like a typical haunting ghost experience. I mean, and I mean, you might be right about that. I mean, everybody knows the druids and other cults back in the old days used to sacrifice humans for their pagan rituals. So, I mean, it could have been used for that, I guess. I mean, 10 to 1, it was mainly used for animals, but still, I mean, who's to say there wasn't a accident at some point, or just somebody lived there and worked there until they got to an old age and passed away, and they're just unrestful. They want to stay around, and they're just checking you out, probably, most likely. I mean, it's the fact that they disappeared. The fact they disappeared from head to toe is kind of the interesting part to me, because that's not usually the way like ghosts usually just, from experiences I've been told, usually just kind of fade away completely. They don't usually just go from head to toe, which is strange, but I don't know, it's not the strangest thing I've ever heard, but it's a little weird. I mean, I trying to wrap my head around it as I just woke up is is always fun, but I mean, it's just I don't know. I mean, it sounds like a kind of creep. It sounds creepy. I mean, and the fact there were footprints, because ghosts usually don't leave footprints. So
yeah, that was the weird thing. Yeah, the footprints, and I mean, no one could get into the cottage. We locked the door from the entrance door. But as I say, this inside door was locked into this place where you weren't allowed to go. It was locked for a reason. Yet the doors were walking away from the door. The footprints were walking away from that locked door. And then after cleaning them, they just came back again the next day. That was a bit like, wow, a bit head scratchy, a bit weird, a bit freaky.
yeah, I mean, Phantom Footprints. Hell, I'm down for
Yeah,
it. So I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
it's it's almost like a scene from a old movie. Like
Mm,
it really is. Which I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know the UK is very haunted all over
mm,
because it's a old it's a very old
yeah,
country. Our history there is millennial for God's sake. So
mm,
who knows what it was? I mean,
mm,
I'd be interested to see a UK paranormal investigation team go up there and see what they could find. But
yeah, that'd be
probably
cool.
they should actually. It probably would be an interesting location, especially if they could somehow get into that slaughterhouse. Like if they could,
Mm,
I don't know if someone manages that property and like actually like has a lock on it, like they could take off for this team. But
yeah.
be interesting.
What was interesting when we got there, we did notice there was a for sale sign on, so it was for sale, the cottage. And after staying there, so it was through a letting agency you could book, but try and not explain it. So there was private owners of the place, and then through a letting agency you could book your holiday through it. However, them owners did have it all for sale, and I think I know why now.
I mean, it's interesting because I mean, why would they have that locked off? Like,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be like an interesting like historical thing to see an old slaughterhouse? I
Mm.
mean, it kind of makes you think like what's in
Yeah.
there they don't want people seeing. So
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's just maybe there's old machinery or something, and they don't want people getting hurt and getting sued for it. So I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
that it could be as simple as that. But I don't know. I'd have to find out more about the location to really know that. But it's definitely an interesting experience. One I never had. So so did this experience help with your books at all? About you? Well, okay, let's go back a little bit because
Yeah.
when did you start writing your? Because I know you write a lot of books, fiction and
Yeah.
nonfiction.
Yeah.
So you were already writing it by this point, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Yeah. So my first book I wrote was Beneath the Floodlights, which was a vampire tale. And it's about vampires merging with a UK soccer team. So that's a bit unusual. And, it was very traditional in terms of if my vampires smelt blood, they would go for the jugular, literally. So they weren't like your sparkly vampires. Everything has its place, but my vampires were like your traditional hard-hitting, hard-biting vampire. So that was my first book, which was really enjoyable because, as I said before, I love all that sort of characters of vampires, werewolves, the whole lot. The strange thing then was before this experience, I did set my second standalone book, which is called Things I'll Never See, in the Peak District. And it's about a rock star who buys a haunted house in the Peak District, which is where I had the experience. But I mean, he bought a massive mansion. I only stayed in a cottage. But what the story is, the protagonist Jake, he's been a big star in a band in the 80s. In the 90s, he's not getting such good recognition as a rock star in the 90s. So it's set in the 90s when backdrop to grunge and Britpop, Nirvana, Oasis over here, that kind of thing. But he's struggling as a musician to make his name as a solo artist. And then he's very disillusioned with the Capitol. He's blamed for his girlfriend's death, all sorts of this. So he retreats to the Peak District and buys this big, massive mansion that turns out to be haunted. And to help him get his career back on track, he starts to, I don't want to spoil it, but he starts to get some help from beyond the grave, shall we say, to help him with his songwriting experience to get his career back on track. But that's the interesting thing. That was in the Peak District. And then I went and had my experience in the Peak District. So, yeah.
Interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
and
Then,
it's actually funny.
go
It's
on,
actually
sir.
funny for our watchers out there right now, because you have a few, and for all listeners who will hear this, maybe it might be out by the time this happens. But Martin will be on me and my co-host music show as well come May. So looking forward to that as well. But
Yeah.
and just to throw it out there for all the watchers, see it if you're gonna write a book about a British rock star buying a haunted mansion, I would have to throw Ozzy Osbourne in there somehow. I would throw Ozzy
Yeah,
Osbourne in there, even for a fucking page. I would throw Ozzy Osbourne in there, but somehow I thought I would throw him in there, but because I mean you can't do scary musician type stuff without throwing in Ozzy. You just can't. Like I don't know.
I
That's the
mean,
first thing that came to my mind.
Ozzy grew up about 3 miles from where I live, in Aston, Birmingham. So
Nice.
Ozzy's my neck of the woods, so it's cool. And Black Sabbath are obviously massive worldwide, but they're
Of
from
course.
my hometown of Birmingham. It's cool. And Black Sabbath and Ozzy, I mentioned actually in one of my Judd Stone novels, the fourth book. So there's a Judd Stone series, which is basically about a private investigator, but he gets involved in all sorts of things, including paranormal things. And the last book I wrote, actually, Double Fancy, in the Judd Stone series, they come across a gangster who's very much into Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne and all that kind of thing. So it gets a mention in that book. Strange.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Which
yeah,
I mean, yeah. Which I was actually looking at that, and I saw that one of the books was titled "The 27 Club," and
yeah.
I'm assuming it's about the famous 27 Club conspiracy about about
It
famous
is.
people dying when they're 27. Okay,
It
cool.
is. It is. I mean,
I-
again, that's just a subject that's fascinated me for a long, long time. Like just as much as werewolves, vampires, like just a topic. But obviously, I mean, this is it's factual that these people sadly have died at the age of 27, and it's just like why on earth, your great people like Jim Morrison, Amy Winehouse, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix. Brian Jones from Rolling Stones. I know I'm going to have missed some people out there. Kurt Cobain. It's just a phenomenon that's really, really fascinated me. So with Judd Stone in the series, I weaved a story around that kind of subject matter, where he tries to work out why it keeps happening. And in parallel, and he goes into numerology and all sorts of things, with the number 27 and that. Is it that's making it happen? Doesn't necessarily come up with a conclusion, because I think when I write about conspiracy theories and things in my books, I kind of present some thought-provoking things, but it's not for me to decide and say categorically what's happening. Let the reader go away, then research and think, okay, that could happen. What's their take on it? So I present a few different things, but he doesn't conclude why it happens. But what makes it an interesting story is trying to prevent a 26-year-old pop star becoming the next 27 victim, and she's on good course to become the next 27 victim because of her lifestyle and that. So yes, that's
I
right.
see that's because the 27 Club is actually on my conspiracy. I've done this show. Multiple people, a lot of
Yeah,
people have done it on this show, but I mean, it's on there, and whenever I think about it, I've talked about it on other podcasts too, and it's just it's to me, it's either it's the old theory of the brightest candles burn out the fastest,
yeah, yeah,
because they just get too popular too fast, and they can't handle the lifestyle, and eventually it just overtakes them.
yeah,
But then again, there's the whole other side of it, which is what did they do to get this popularity by chance? Was there otherworldly things involved in it, and
yeah,
is there a deadline on how long it's going to last? So, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
you don't sign a deal with the devil unless you read the fine print. So I mean,
yeah.
just
All
a-
that stuff. Yeah.
just ask Robert Johnson. But I mean,
Exactly, yeah. It started it all off, didn't it? Yeah, it's already set. Yeah, and that is obviously covered in the book, the Robert Johnson story and the myth or legend around that. But I always think you're absolutely right that the candle burning out. These people live fast, don't they? They live fast, and. But I just always think, well, why 27? Why not 26, 28? Why is it always 27? Surely some people can last an extra year or two. But it's 27 seems to be the cutoff point, and that is bizarre. That I thought, it's so definitive, But who knows? Who knows really why it happens? But it's a weird thing, tragic and weird.
it is. I mean, Kurt Cobain's a whole nother story by itself. I mean, I personally don't believe that he killed himself. I personally don't believe
Mm,
that. But I know I'm not alone in that belief either, but I mean, it's just
Yeah.
we'll never know. Well, I don't think we'll ever know unless Courtney Love wants to say something on her deathbed, maybe. But other than that, I don't think we'll ever know for sure. But gonna take a step back here though, because since I actually have someone from the UK on who is into vampires, I gotta ask this: have you heard of the Highgate Vampire?
I haven't. I know Highgate. You mean Highgate in London?
Highgate Cemetery, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I know Highgate Cemetery as well. So, a lot of famous people in there. I've been to that area, and George Michael's buried there, of course, and a few other people. Malcolm McLaren. It's a very famous cemetery, but I haven't heard of the vampire, mate. No, I haven't.
It's been it's been a I don't want to say a myth or it's been a legend for
Yeah.
that's a better word. It's been a legend since I think at least the 1800s that Highgate Cemetery. If you go there at night, there people have seen some kind of creature running around the cemetery,
Right.
and a lot of paranormal investigation teams actually looked into it, and it doesn't seem to be a ghost. It seems to
Mm,
be more flesh and blood, and
right.
I mean, nobody wants to get close enough to really figure out what it is, but and you can't get it. And from what I've been told, you cannot get in there at night without special permission from the
Yeah, that's true.
town.
That is true. That is true.
They lock it because of all the famous people that are buried there. They don't want people going in there and trying to. I mean, I think
Mm,
originally it was just because they didn't want grave robbers, but
mm,
it's nowadays because they don't want people going in there at night to do things like seances and stuff and over
mm,
like the
mm,
graves of famous people just to for shits and giggles, basically. But I mean, if you could actually get some of these people to come up and talk to you, that'd be awesome. But
mm,
I'm sure these celebrities, I'm sure a lot of young musicians would like to talk to them. But yeah, the Highgate Vampire is one of the most prolific actual vampire cases in the world. Like, there's only a few of them, only a few vampire cases I know off the top of my head. I mean, I know there's a couple more I don't know off the top of my head, but there's only a handful to begin with because
mm,
it's one of those cryptids that is
mm,
so steeped in fiction that people don't want to believe
mm,
it's real.
mm, mm.
So, I mean, and who's to say that vampiric creatures don't exist, whether they be extraterrestrial or humans? Who knows? I mean, it could go either way. It could
Mm,
be a humans making deals with entities type thing.
mm,
But
mm.
I, I mean, I don't know. It's possible. I mean,
Yeah. I
I know in
mean,
America in the 1700s, 1800s, there was a couple cases too where they thought people were vampires, but it really was just diseases that were unknown at the time that they didn't realize why people were why their bodies looked fresh even though they were buried. So, I mean, it
mm,
was diseases at the time, but that were
mm,
just unknown. But the Highgate vampire can be explained because it's not really like just a body; it's
mm.
something that people have seen moving around the cemetery at night, and they can't explain it.
I need to research. I don't know how I don't know how that's passed me by. So I need to go and definitely look at that. I mean, if there is going to be a creature in any given cemetery, you can see why Highgate Cemetery is quite gothic looking. Very similar actually to Père Lachaise in Paris, which I've been to, which is where Jim Morrison's buried, and again, a 27 Club member, of course, and lots of other famous people are buried there. Edith Piaf, Oscar Wilde. So that's again a very gothic looking cemetery in Paris. If anyone ever gets to go there, if going around cemeteries is your thing, it's actually really interesting and quite a spectacle to see. So I can understand how something's been at least rumoured to be in Highgate Cemetery, because, as I say, it lends itself to the whole image and ethos of that kind of thing. Very gothic.
And I mean, personally, I mean, if a vampire is to hang out somewhere,
Mm,
why wouldn't they hang out at a cemetery? I mean, it's kind of a good hiding spot because people don't want to go there at night usually anyway because
oh,
it's
yeah, yeah.
creepy. I mean, I've been to cemeteries at night. It's creepy as hell. Like you, it always feels like there's something watching you, and it's just kind of creepy. But
Mm, mm.
so your vampire novel is it based around is it based off of any famous vampire stories, or is it kind of like
Um,
a standalone?
it's a standalone. I mean, I'd say it's inspired by. I love the films The Lost Boys, and I love the film uh, from dusk till dusk stories I've ever seen Interview with the Vampire, going back to the 70s Dracula movies and that. There's a bit of that all pulls together to inspire me to write a novel. But I think The Lost Boys, that idea of boys going missing and being vampires, that helped me think about a nest of young footballers who are vampires, and they join a football team. And actually, it's called Beneath Floodlights because, as you know, vampires, their superpowers are more prolific at night time. So when there was night games on for this particular fictional football team, soccer team, they become fantastic footballers on the night because their powers are charged and they're winning games 13, 14, 15-0 and that. And no one can quite work it out. But there's a Professor Cesar Prodonescu. He's actually from Transylvania, so he's a Transylvanian Romanian football coach manager who owns this sort of nest of vampires, who also go under the illusion, if that's the right word, of a football academy, a soccer academy of young footballers. So there's two things going on. There's like the vampire side of it, where they're wreaking havoc on the streets of Birmingham. But the other thing is that they actually do want to win football matches and play soccer. But what he's purposely come to Birmingham for, the professor, is, as well as being a professor of football, is professor of genealogy, and he knows that the world's first ever vampire is buried in a park in Sutton Park in Birmingham. So he wants to get to that and get the DNA from the world's first vampire to then make this master race of vampires.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
All
fiction.
Okay.
It's all fiction.
Well, yeah, of course.
Who knows?
I mean, it's possible. I mean, vampires. I mean, yeah, the idea of vampires originated from like Romania, but I mean, Romania and Britain are not that far apart, so who knows? But it's highly possible. But I gotta ask, because I mean, I know you're
that word Transylvania. It just that word that just sounds incredibly paranormal or something. No, I mean Transylvania. It just sounds a great name.
It does. I mean, and Transylvania has interesting history. Like the real history of Transylvania is interesting enough that it lends to supernatural lore as well. Because I mean, it's full of dark woods, and from what I've heard of people who have been there, it's terrifying. Especially at night, it's terrifying. And I mean, there's a lot of wild animals that we know exist that are freaking terrifying. I mean. Which is kind of like I mean, the idea of werewolves kind of came from that part of the world as well because of that. I mean, the idea of wolves in the night, and you know, there are cases of humans supposedly turning into wolves. I mean, lycanthropy is a real thing. I mean, it's not really what werewolves are, but it's a real thing of wolves getting. I mean, humans getting extra hair and having insomnia to some degree. So I mean, it's all very coincidental, and I personally hate the word werewolf. I always have hated it since I got into the paranormal, because there is a thing called dogmen that exist, that has been basically proven to exist at this point. And I think werewolves are.
I've heard of that.
I think werewolves are based off dogmen. That's my theory. Is that the idea of werewolves is based off dogmen and things that people actually saw back in the olden days, and they just made it more fictional with the full moon thing and the silver bullet legends. I mean, they had to have a way to explain what happens to it, and they had to have a way to kill it, because that's the way humans are.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, dogmen are actually in the UK as well, from what I've been told. I can't think of any locations off the top of my head, but I mean, I know they have been seen in the UK occasionally, not as often as in America, of course, because America's a lot bigger. But I mean, I don't know. Dogmen are a worldwide phenomenon, because I mean, you look at Anubis in Egyptian mythology, and it's a dogman. Literally, it's literally a dogman. So who's to say they haven't been around forever and that they're just people worshipped them at one point, or certain people worship them and others feared them. I mean, so who's to say they're just not a creature that's been around since the beginning of time and we just never caught one because you're not going to catch one. I don't think you
No,
could.
it'd be brave to try. Yeah,
And to try to catch one would be a deadly endeavor, that's for sure.
yeah,
But
yeah, indeed.
so, as far as since you did write about ghosts, I got to ask because I'd like to get
Yeah.
everybody's theory on this. How do you like? What is your theory on ghosts? Are they just souls trapped on Earth, or are
Hmm.
they extraterrestrial in nature to some degree? Or I mean, basically, I'm kind of asking you like what you think happens when we die.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's only my opinion. I don't think they're extraterrestrial. You know, I think I've got potentially two explanations for them. I think one is they're trapped on Earth and not quite sure that they're dead themselves, and therefore haven't passed over. The other thought process I have is that you can't really kill energy, and therefore your spirit, your soul, whatever you want to call it, is part of the energy you create. And if someone has been in a certain place for a long, long time, for example, at a house and lived there all their life, and has took the same pathway through the corridors or whatever, that energy's there. And even when that person dies and the shell is there full buried, the shell of the body is buried or cremated or whatever, and it's gone, perhaps the energy, like like a photograph, remains potentially. I think that can happen. So it's like a residual energy that stays, but who really knows, you know? I'm just very confident that they exist after seeing one as well. I already had an open mind, but now I've seen one. So 100% in my mind they exist. But what you know, it's only a theory, and I suppose none of us will ever know till you know we unfortunately pass away. But that's my theories. I've got a couple of theories. That one, yeah, it's trapped, and the other one is it's some sort of energy that's there.
Yeah, the second one you mentioned is kind of the
Mm,
idea of a residual haunting. Like
mm,
I feel like that does happen because I mean, Einstein said it. He's like, energy cannot be displaced. It cannot be destroyed.
mm,
It
mm,
has to go somewhere. So maybe that is what it is. Just,
mm,
I mean, I live with spirits. I never seen one per se, but other people that have been in my house have, and
mm,
I I can kind of sense them in a way, empathically. But it's just this, and he seems to fall. The one of them, that the main one I know of, seems to follow. Well, at least when we first moved in, he seemed to follow the same path through the house. Like he would stay in
yeah,
the same areas. He go back and forth between the garage and the carport because that's where he did a lot of work in his life. So I don't know. I mean, it makes sense. That's why the residual haunting thing to me makes sense. It really does.
mm, mm,
And I mean, the first one has this, the Einstein theory works for the first one too because if they're trapped on Earth, then that's where they're going to be. Their energy's going to be. It's not
mm,
going to go to whatever you may believe may be in the
mm.
afterlife. It's not going to go there if it's trapped on Earth for some reason, whether it's unfinished business or whether it
Yeah,
just is a punishment to get trapped on Earth. Maybe I don't know. I mean, maybe it's a punishment of types. Maybe that is what
yeah.
hell actually is because I mean, to be stuck where you've been stuck all your life and you don't get to go anywhere afterwards, like that to me be a punishment. Like I've
I
been
mean,
here for
yeah.
80 years. I don't want to be here any longer.
I mean, you could think it like, is it a choice? So you could, if you know, not all, not all hauntings, ghosts necessarily have got bad intention, but maybe some of them choose to haunt, um, and choose to stay around. But what I was saying at the beginning was, do they actually not know that they've died, and they're just they just think they're in their usual life, but they're actually not. I don't know. It could be either of them things. Another potential theory is that with time dimensions, and time slippages, that you're actually seeing someone who is very much alive, but just at a different time. Um, and there's that as well. So there's a whole heap of theories. What the reality is, I don't know. They're all plausible, I guess. They're all plausible.
Which I mean, it does make sense. And I've had another author. Actually, one of my first guests in the show was another author from the U.S. She writes a book. She writes a book series about
Mm.
a a man who could see ghosts, basically through a tragic life accident, and
Right.
talk to them. And he has ghost buddies, and multiple times throughout the two books she's put out, which I've got to read the second book because I was a beta reader for it because she wants to come back on the show for it, so she gave it to me way ahead of time to read, and I
Mm.
cannot wait to talk about it. Oh my God, it's such a good series. I mean, very religious based series, but I'm
Yeah.
not technically religious, but
Mm.
still, it's good to read for anybody. So I mean, that's
Mm.
great. That's a great thing, but the ghosts in the stories, and multiple times they have to explain to new ghosts like what's
Mm.
going on because they don't know they passed. They think
Yeah.
they're still alive, and they're sitting there yelling, screaming at like their loved ones, trying to get their attention, and it's just like they have to go over and be like, listen, yeah, you're not gonna be able to talk to them. Like it just, I
Mm.
mean, it makes sense to me that maybe some of them don't realize they're passed on. I mean, because
Mm.
it happens so fast sometimes. There's no way you would know if
Mm.
someone's dying of a disease in a bed in a hospital for months and years, then maybe, yeah, then maybe those are the ones that probably realize, like, yeah, I moved on most likely. But
Yeah.
it's when there's freak accidents, whether it be
Yeah.
automobile or anything else, like you wouldn't know because you're just there, and one second you're not. Like it's just
Mm.
literally a split second exchange, and you're gone. So
Mm.
it makes sense to me. It makes sense.
Mm. Mm.
So question now is, are you working on any future paranormal based books?
What was that? You broke up a little bit. Was you asking
Oh,
me if I've
sorry.
got any future? Yeah.
Yeah, are there any future paranormal based books coming up?
Yeah. I mean, there's a few projects I'm involved with non-fiction music at the minute. However, the Judd Stone series, books 5 and 6, are in transit. Should we say they're kind I've started them. Let me put it that way. And one of them is kind of paranormal related because it explores the haunting, and it's based on a Mexican legend that I read of, where there's a Mexican island apparently,
Island of the
and
Dolls?
yeah, Island of the Dolls, yeah, and that and that
Nice.
there's a few different reasonings. So I've researched of what that can be. It's a girl who drowned and she's haunting. It's a mother who lost a baby and therefore she's haunting it, or whatever. And the dolls are there to appease the spirit, I believe. So I've just kind of took that another fascinating topic, and this is what I do. I hear fascinating topics, and I think, well, I want to weave something around that. So I've took that kind of concept, changed it a bit, and set it in the UK, where basically a girl's going to have drowned, but Judd Stone, the private investigator, who's a very anti-hero. He's not your usual. He ain't like a private investigator with a magnifying glass. He's very sort of unconventional. He kills people, he fights people, but he gets the job done. So he's got to try and work out what has happened to this girl and why is she haunting the lake in Birmingham, actually, in Sutton Park again, actually. And I haven't quite understood yet where that's going or what the conclusion is, because one of my writing processes, I'm not someone who kind of knows exactly where the journey's going and destination. It flows as I go along, and I get different ideas and light bulb ideas along the way. So it's not a fait accompli, but obviously that's going to be based on some sort of haunting. So that's the next paranormal book. In saying that, I love the Judd Stone series. It's been very well received, but yeah, I do at some point want to do more kind of, I guess, standalone, very paranormal based books. Whether that
Well,
be
I, I
something,
was gonna say, since you are in the UK,
yeah,
I mean, one of the biggest paranormal phenomenons that happens in the world. I mean, it's more in the UK than anywhere else in the world, really.
yeah,
Is the whole idea of the Fae, of elementals, and that whole dimension of different creatures that come from that dimension. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
are you gonna have you ever thought about playing with that in a novel? Like almost.
Uh, not. I've done werewolves. Well, flirted with werewolves in the book 3, which is Luna. I flirt. You know, it's not. It's not. I wouldn't call it a werewolf tale, but it flirts with werewolves within that. But other creatures and things, I've kind of thought about it, but never really had the idea in any sort of conviction where I think at the moment I've got that idea, and yes, I can turn that into a novel. So never say never. I would love to do it of all different aspects of the paranormal, but I haven't quite nailed that one yet. But like I say never. So one day something will come to me where I'll go, that's it. I can
I
do that.
mean,
Griffin or whatever, you know.
I mean,
Whatever.
it'd be,
Goblins, whatever.
I mean, yeah, it would be like really interesting to hear. I mean, I don't know. There hasn't been that many great books about like the Fays or the like
Mm,
fairies,
mm,
trolls, ogres, all that fun
mm.
stuff. Like that, there hasn't been many books in recent times about them. So I feel like it's a topic that could be breached again and made into like an
Definitely.
amazing.
Yeah, you know, my mind is open definitely to exploring that a bit more, and it does interest me, all that sort of woodland creatures and fays and things. So yeah, never say never. I could definitely see myself doing it. I just haven't had that conviction of an idea that I feel justifies that topic yet. But I will at some point, someday.
Of course. I mean, you got the time. You got the time to do it
Yeah,
eventually. But just an idea came to my mind because when I think of the UK and the paranormal, that's the first thing that comes to mind always is Fae. Because I
yeah,
mean, it's
yeah.
it's basically been sewn into the history of the UK in some ways where
Mm,
some people can't think of anything but reality for it. So,
mm.
and I mean, they
Yeah,
are.
there is what. So my last Judgestone book, book 4, that's my most recent release, Double Fantasy. We were talking about that before. Actually, what happens in that is, and this is based on a real legend. There's a little village just outside of Liverpool called Crank, and it's called Crank. Believe it or not, that is the name of the village, real place. And I've been there, and there's some caverns there. And the legend goes that there was 3 boys. They went into the caverns, and they found these little cannibalistic race of people who spoke a different language, didn't speak English, no known language, and so I weaved that into the story. And only one of the boys got out to live to tell the tale. The other 2 were eaten. And what happened was soldiers went down with torches. They could hear. They never saw the little people that the surviving boy had spoke about, but they could hear this sort of little language, these little voices going on that was a language not known, and they just said they felt prying eyes upon them everywhere they turned, and they got out there pretty sharpish. And they're supposed to have found human bones in there, so there you go.
Well, yeah. I mean, the idea of that's kind of the same idea that exists where I'm from with puckwudgies. I mean, it's
Mm,
kind of the same folklore in a way. I mean, the
mm,
same idea that these little beings. I mean, we know that hobbits existed at some
yeah,
point in past, or
yeah,
what we call hobbits, but that's not the real name for them. But I mean, they're basically were little people at one time. So why wouldn't there still be? And they would be not exactly advanced humans because they would be hiding for all these years because they
yeah,
probably saw the big humans killing them, and they probably decided, yeah, let's stop hanging around these people. But
yeah,
uh, I mean, that's where the idea of dwarves and all that came from as well in classic British folklore and whatnot. So
mhm,
grim tales and all that. But I don't know. It makes for interesting thoughts. I mean, I love the idea of all these things possibly existing. It
yeah.
just makes the world seem more interesting than just
Oh, totally.
it can't
But
be just us. Humans are boring. It can't be just us. But
no.
I mean, it's just I don't really know what. But let me ask you this because I asked this of every UK guest I have, and the answers always differ, but it's always interesting because you don't hear much about it. Have you heard of any Bigfoot sightings in the UK?
No. Bigfoot is something again that's always fascinated me since a young age. Sasquatch and that, and the Yeti, the version of Bigfoot in the Antarctic or whatever it is. But no,
Himalayas.
yeah, Himalayas. Thank you for that. Yeah, Himalayas. It's the abominable snowman, isn't it? I don't know. Anyway, there's all these big man-like creatures that aren't men out there, aren't they? And Bigfoot is one that's always fascinated me. I was watching a documentary the other day, and they actually done a 3D image of the footprint, and it was huge. And but anyway, no is the answer. I've never heard anything like that in the UK. We've had similar things like the Beast of Bodmin Moor and things like that, which is supposed to be a like a big black cat, but bigger than a jaguar or a puma or something. That
I've heard of that actually. Yeah,
and a few like that. And then there's the theories that it's just someone had it as a pet, couldn't cope with it, and just threw it out on the moors, and it lives out there now. But as in terms of a Bigfoot type creature, unfortunately, I've never heard of that. I say unfortunately, I wouldn't want to come across him necessarily. But,
I mean, it's interesting because that's usually the answer is like that. Most people are not familiar with one. I may have heard of like one or two experiences in the UK with it, but I mean, it isn't an island, so I don't. I mean, but it was also connected at one point, so it makes you question like how old, like when did these creatures first start appearing? Because if it wasn't during Pangea, then when did they first start appearing? Which kind of lends more credence to the ultra-terrestrial or extraterrestrial theories behind them, and I don't like that so much because I kind of like the old they've been around as long as we have theory. But
yeah.
So I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, in the Beast of Bogman Moor that you mentioned, I mean, that's typically put under like the ABCs, folklore. Well, not folklore because ABCs are reality. Alien big cats, not extraterrestrial alien, but just big cats that are where they shouldn't be, so they're aliens. But I mean, that's a phenomenon that actually is huge in America because of like you said, people buying pets that they shouldn't have and then not able to handle them anymore, so they let them free. Which, if that cat's willing to go free, then apparently you should never have to begin with because it doesn't care about you. But because if it's a cat that actually loves you, it's not going to just run away. It'll stay with you and try to get back inside. But I mean, it's also because the government has been introducing some of these bigger cats back into areas across the United States since they've been trying to repopulate them because all the settlers killed them off in the early 1700s. So, I mean, like the wolves of the Northeast. I mean, they used to be all over the Northeast until the settlers slaughtered them all. But sad as that is. But I mean, there's a lot of these stories of big cats being where they shouldn't be, and it's interesting. I mean, you'll see pictures online of like hunting cameras like catching big black cats in the middle of like a New Jersey forest, and it's just like that shouldn't be there. What's going on here? Like I don't know. It's one of my favorite paranormal topics as well because I mean it's explainable. I like it because it's one of the more explainable topics and But I mean, maybe there just are creatures that we don't know exist, animals we haven't really discovered because they're not there in mass numbers that we can see them every day. I mean, it's possible. I mean, I know bears exist around my house. Do I ever see one? Thank God, no. But I mean, I know they exist. I don't want to run into one, but I know they exist. I'll gladly watch one from my back window and hopefully see one day, but I don't want to be outside when it's there. Like, it's just, humans are not meant to know every creature that exists out there because we're not meant to deal with them because we'd be dead. We'd be dead if we dealt with a lot of them. So the reasons they're apex predators, for God's sake.
I mean, there's got to be animals that have not yet been discovered in the heart of the Amazon jungle and things like that, for example. Never been creatures, not necessarily fearsome creatures, but there must be loads out there. But obviously what we have in the UK up in Scotland is the Loch Ness Monster as well. That's an always fascinating. I've been to Loch Ness, beautiful part of the world. Absolutely gorgeous. And I haven't seen Nessie, but I've been looking on that big, massive 25-mile lake to see if I can see the slightest little...
How did I forget about Nessie? It's not the first time I forgot about Nessie either. And it's weird because I that was one of the creatures that got me into the paranormal was Loch
Mm,
Ness monster. So I mean, and I don't know. I have a thing for living dinosaurs
mm,
theories.
mm.
So I mean, and
Yeah.
you said the Amazon's another good example of where that could be. But I mean, Nessie kind of falls into that category, and
Mm,
I kind of do group all the sea lake monsters into that category because
yeah.
they are technically living dinosaurs, and
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
most likely that's what they are. And I mean, I kind of fall on the trip. I kind of follow with Loch Ness on the whole theory that there's got to be like an underground cavern system in the Ness that
Mm,
or in the loch that goes to the ocean. So
mm.
that's why it's not always seen. That's why
Yeah.
it's been able to get out there, and there's got to be more than one of them because apparently it's been breeding since it's been seen for
Mm.
hundreds of years. So, I mean, I don't know. That's kind of the theory I go to. But what do you think about Loch Ness? Like, what?
Um, I'd love to think there is a monster in there. And I think you're right. If there is something, it's kind of a throwback from the dinosaur age. It's kind of something that's managed to stay around somehow. And I think, I have watched programs and things on it and done research with a little R, not in a big way. And I do believe that from the loch you can get out to the ocean. So that would, and this creature would live very deep within the waters anyway, and wouldn't break the surface that often, I don't think, or it doesn't need to. And I think I did see um, one program that suggested the sort of life that's in there does lend itself to having a predator of that size. It can feed off what's in that loch, the sort of plankton and the fishes and that. So again, open mind. If I had a gun at my head, I'd probably say no, it doesn't exist. There isn't one in there. But I'd love to think there was. I'd love to. I'd love it. I'd love to get concrete proof.
Well, I mean, I found it a lot harder to believe when I was younger
Yeah.
because I didn't hear the other tales yet. But
Mm,
once I started hearing of all, I mean, it was the only one I knew about when I was a kid was the Loch Ness monster. There was no other sea monster I really heard about. But then I started hearing about Bessie. I started hearing about
yeah.
and of course, it's too early in the morning for me, so I'm gonna start drawing blanks on all these names. But there in the United States alone, there are so many
Yeah.
tales of lake monsters and sea
Yeah.
monsters that
Lake Placid's
uh,
one, isn't it? Isn't Lake Placid one in the States?
yes,
Yeah.
Lake Placid I think might have one. I mean, Lake Placid's more known for the alligator movies, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's I think there might be one there. I know there's. Oh my God, why am I drawing a blank on the New York one? That it's gonna. Oh my God, I'm gonna stop myself for this later when I remember it. But there's one. I grew up in New York, so there's one up near the Great Lakes that exists, and oh my God, how am I not thinking what it is? God, it's. Sorry, folks. I only woke up an hour ago, so trying to think of names like this is just.
We know that
I
we
have
know the places where they have them, so that's fine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's tons of tales of sea monsters and lake monsters all over the world, but America
Mm,
is full of them.
mm,
And and of course, we can't go without mentioning the fact that they've been seen in the oceans to this
mm,
day.
mm.
People see things they can't explain in the oceans. So,
Yeah,
which I
absolutely.
mean, like you said with the Amazon, we
Yeah,
do not know everything that's in the ocean. That's for
totally agree.
darn sure. I
100%
mean,
agree with you. Yeah,
the
100%.
ocean's deep. The ocean's deep. We don't know everything that's there, and
Yeah.
these things would have plenty of room to hide. It's not like they're out of space. Like, I mean, as far as living dinosaurs go for other ones, I mean, yeah, the sea monsters are kind of like the most easiest. They would have been able to avoid the dinosaur
Mm,
apocalypse basically.
mm,
But I mean, there is of course Mokele Mbembe down in the Congo that has supposedly existed since as far back as we know.
mm,
And the I mean the only other real example I truly believe does is in the Amazon. I believe in Peru.
mm,
There is a tribe that is basically worships these raptor-like creatures that live in the jungle. And I mean, I I can't say I want to go looking for velociraptors, so it's I wouldn't go there looking for it. But I mean, I can believe they might exist in there because who knows what the heck's in the Amazon? Who knows what's in the Congo? I mean, there's so many deep jungles that I mean, we didn't know gorillas were a thing. They were a paranormal creature. They were a cryptid until we actually caught one and studied it, and we're like, oh, it's like us. But so I mean, there's a lot of creatures that have been discovered. I mean, that we thought were cryptids, but are really just other animals that we haven't discovered yet. So who knows? The possibilities are endless, and that's
Yeah,
why I love this topic. It's really why I love this
yeah,
topic because the possibilities are endless in this world.
yeah.
But at this point, I will let you gladly tell people where they can find your books, where they can find you. Just promote yourself to the fullest.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. Yeah, so all the books I've spoke about today are available through my website, www.martintracey.co.uk, and that's Tracy with an E, so it's MartinTracey. Also on Amazon, of course, which includes every platform internationally, Amazon.uk, Amazon, the US, Amazon.com, that is, isn't it? It's on all the websites, even Japan, Netherlands, whatever, any country you name, you'll find my books on Amazon. I'm available on social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, you name it, I'm probably on it. I sometimes go under the handle Martin at Molyneux author. The Molyneux bit is because of my love of my football team, Wolverhampton Wanderers. That's like a UK thing. But Martin Tracey, you should find me easy enough on all the social media, and I love connecting with people over social media. So feel free to do that. But otherwise, yeah, it's my website. And the links to social media are on my website anyway. So once more, www.martintracey.co.uk. And thanks again for having me, Jeremy. And thanks for listening,
Oh,
everyone.
it's been my pleasure. I always love talking to people from other parts of the world because I mean it's things we don't know about over here. So it's always a fun conversation. And of course, the link to your site will also be in the description of this podcast and releases it's
That's it.
in podcast form just to make it easier for people. And you all know where you can find me. It's way too early in the morning for me to recite it all. But and if you don't know, just shame. But check out the outro. You'll hear it all there and or just check out where you're streaming live. I mean, that's always a good way to do it too. But until next time, I will be back this week with plenty of more episodes for you guys. And I do want to thank Martin for coming on because it's been a fascinating hour of discussion on different topics. And until next time, guys, have a good one. I'm going to go finish my coffee.